Welcome to Sleepy Science Stories. Tonight, we explore the first forests on Earth, a time when trees had not yet risen from the ground, when the landscape was bare and strange, and life was just beginning to reach upward toward the sky. Let yourself relax as we journey through hundreds of millions of years, witnessing the patient, beautiful emergence of the first ancient forests. Close your eyes, breathe deeply. Imagine, if you will, a world without trees. It is difficult for us to picture living as we do in a world where forests cover continents, where the silhouettes of oak and pine and maple define our horizons. But for most of Earth's long history, there were no trees at all. The land was a place of rock and water, of low-growing carpets of green, but no tall trunks reaching skyward, no canopies filtering the light into dappled patterns on the forest floor. This is where our story begins. Roughly 450 million years ago, in a period scientists call the Ordovician, the Earth's continents are arranged differently than they are today, clustered in strange configurations across the globe. The climate is warm, the atmosphere rich with carbon dioxide, and the oceans teem with life. But the land is still a frontier, still being colonized by the first brave pioneers of the plant kingdom. Along the edges of ancient seas and rivers, small plants have begun to establish themselves. These are not trees, not even close. They are tiny, humble organisms, most of them standing no taller than your finger. They have no roots, not true roots as we understand them today. Instead, they anchor themselves with simple hair-like structures called rhizoids, which grip the soil and rock. They have no leaves, no flowers, no seeds. They reproduce through spores, microscopic packages of genetic material that drift on the wind and water, hoping to find a suitable place to grow. These early plants, scientists believe, resembled modern liverworts and mosses. Picture them now, these small green pioneers, hugging the damp earth near the water's edge. The sunlight falls directly upon them, unfiltered by any canopy above. The air is still, or perhaps stirred by a breeze that carries no scent of pine or oak, for such things do not yet exist. The silence of this landscape is profound, broken only by the sound of water and wind, for there are no birds, no insects that buzz and hum among the branches. Slowly, patiently, over millions of years, these small plants spread across the available land. They grow in the spaces where moisture collects, in the valleys and lowlands, along the banks of rivers. They change the soil itself, their tiny bodies breaking down rock into finer and finer particles, their simple chemistry adding organic matter to the mineral substrate. They are preparing the way, though they do not know it, for something greater to come. As we move forward in time, into a period called the Silurian, some 430 million years ago, the plants begin to change. Some lineages develop simple vascular tissue, specialized cells that can transport water and nutrients from the ground up through the plant's body. This is a revolutionary development, though it happens with the characteristic patience of evolution over countless generations. With vascular tissue, plants can grow taller, can venture farther from the water's edge, can begin to explore the possibilities of height. The first vascular plants are still small by our standards, standing perhaps as tall as your knee, but in the context of their time, they are giants. They are strange to look at, these ancient forms. They have no leaves in the traditional sense, but instead bear small, scale-like structures along their stems. They branch in peculiar dichotomous patterns, each stem splitting into two equal forks. Scientists have found their fossils and given them names like Cooksonia and Baragwanathea, names that echo their strangeness and antiquity. Picture these early vascular plants spreading across the landscape, forming dense, low-growing tangles in the moist areas. The world is beginning to green, But still, there are no trees. The tallest organisms stand no higher than a meter, and most are much smaller. The landscape would still seem alien to us, barren by the standards we know, but it is changing, slowly greening, preparing for the revolution that is to come. As we drift deeper into time, we arrive at a period that scientists call the Devonian, beginning some 420 million years ago. The Devonian is a time of tremendous change, both in the oceans and on land. In the seas, fish are diversifying rapidly, developing jaws and armor and fins. But our story remains on land, where something unprecedented is about to happen. The plants of the Devonian are more sophisticated than their Silurian ancestors. Vascular tissue has become more efficient, more complex. Some plants have begun to develop true roots, branching structures that delve into the soil, anchoring the plant more firmly and drawing up water and minerals with greater effectiveness. The evolution of roots is a quiet revolution, but a profound one, for it allows plants to grow taller and venture into drier environments. In the early Devonian, the tallest plants still stand less than 2 meters high. They grow in dense thickets near water, their simple branching forms creating tangles of green. Among these is a plant called Drepanophycus, with its spirally arranged scale leaves and forking branches. Another is Psilophyton, its stems bare except for small spiny projections. These plants are experimenting, in the slow language of evolution, with different strategies for capturing light, for reproducing, for surviving in an increasingly competitive world. But as the Devonian period progresses, some plants begin to grow taller still. By the Middle Devonian, around 390 million years ago, we witness the emergence of what might be called the first forests, though they would look nothing like the forests we know. These are forests of strange, primitive plants, unlike anything alive today. Consider a plant called Watieza, also known by its fossil name Eospermatopterus. Recent discoveries have revealed that Watieza grew to heights of 8 meters or more, making it the tallest known plant of its time. But Watieza is not a tree in the modern sense. It has a trunk. Yes, a columnar structure that rises from the ground. But this trunk is not made of solid wood. Instead, it is composed of a core of soft tissue surrounded by a thick, fleshy covering. At its base, Watieza spreads a network of horizontal roots along the ground, unlike the deep taproots of later trees. The crown of Watieza is equally strange. Rather than branches bearing leaves, Watieza produces a cluster of large, frond-like structures at its top, resembling a massive fern. These fronds unfurl and photosynthesize, capturing the abundant sunlight. When Watieza reproduces, it does not produce flowers or seeds, but rather structures containing spores. The spores drift away on the wind, seeking a place to germinate and begin the cycle anew. Imagine now a forest of Watieza, growing in the moist lowlands of the Middle Devonian. The trunks rise like strange pillars, their surfaces textured and unusual. The fronds rustle in the breeze, creating patterns of light and shadow below. There is a canopy now, the first canopy in Earth's history, though it is an open, irregular one. Beneath the Watieza, smaller plants grow, ferns and fern-like plants, and the earliest representatives of the group that will eventually give rise to true trees. The presence of these tall plants changes the environment itself. The shade they cast alters the temperature and moisture levels at ground level, creating microhabitats. Their roots dig deeper, breaking up rock, mixing organic matter into the soil. When they die and fall, their bodies decay, adding nutrients to the earth. The chemical weathering they cause begins to draw carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, a slow but significant process that will, over millions of years, help to cool the planet. Walking through a Devonian forest of Watiza would be an otherworldly experience. The air is warm and humid, thick with moisture. The light is filtered through the fronds above, creating a dim, greenish illumination below. The ground is soft, carpeted with low-growing plants and decaying organic matter. There are no sounds of animals rustling in the undergrowth. No bird song, for these creatures have not yet evolved or are still confined to the water. The forest is silent except for the whisper of fronds and the occasional crack of a falling trunk. As the Devonian period continues, the forests of Watiza are joined and eventually surpassed by an even more remarkable plant, one that represents a significant step toward the modern concept of a tree. This plant is called Archaeopteris, and it appears in the late Devonian, around 370 million years ago. Archaeopteris is important, scientists believe, because it combines features that will become characteristic of later trees. Archaeopteris grows tall, reaching heights of 30 meters or more, making it substantially taller than Watiza. Its trunk is more solid, more wood-like, composed of genuine woody tissue that provides both strength and a pathway for water and nutrients. This is true secondary xylem, the material we call wood, and its development marks a crucial evolutionary innovation. With wood, plants can grow much taller, can support greater weight, can survive for decades or even centuries. The trunk of Archaeopteris branches, unlike the simple columnar form of Watiza. These branches extend outward and upward, creating a more complex crown structure. Along these branches, Archaeopteris bears structures that look remarkably like fern fronds, with delicate leaflets arranged along a central axis. These fronds photosynthesize, turning sunlight into energy, and when their season is done, they fall, making Archaeopteris one of the first deciduous plants, shedding its photosynthetic structures seasonally. But despite its tree-like appearance and woody trunk, Archaeopteris is not quite a tree in the modern sense. It reproduces through spores, not seeds. It belongs to a group called progymnosperms, which scientists consider to be an intermediate form between spore-bearing plants and seed-bearing ones. Archaeopteris represents a kind of evolutionary experiment, a plant that has developed many of the features that will make trees successful, but has not yet made the final leap to seed reproduction. Imagine a forest dominated by Archaeopteris in the late Devonian. The trees stand tall and relatively close together, their trunks solid and strong, their wood the first true timber on Earth. The canopy is denser than in the Watiza forests, the branches interweaving to create a more continuous cover above. The light that reaches the forest floor is dim and filtered, creating a cool, shaded environment below. Beneath the Archaeopteris canopy, other plants grow in the reduced light. There are ferns, true ferns now, with their characteristic fronds. There are early seed ferns, plants that look like ferns but are actually experimenting with a new reproductive strategy. There are horsetails, relatives of modern equisetum, with their jointed stems and whorls of branches. The forest floor is becoming more complex, more layered, with different plants occupying different niches in the light gradient from the bright canopy to the dark ground. The Archaeopteris forests represent the first ecosystems that we might recognize as truly forest-like. They create their own microclimate, their canopy moderating temperature and retaining moisture. Their roots stabilize the soil, preventing erosion. Their fallen fronds and branches accumulate on the ground, forming a layer of organic matter that hosts fungi and primitive invertebrates. These forests are shaping the land in ways that will persist, creating feedbacks and cycles that will become fundamental to terrestrial ecosystems. Scientists believe that the spread of Archaeopteris forests had global effects. The deep roots of these trees enhanced chemical weathering of rock, drawing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and locking it away in the form of organic matter and carbonate minerals. This process contributed to a gradual cooling of the planet through the late Devonian, potentially triggering or contributing to glaciation events in the southern hemisphere. The forests were not just inhabitants of the Earth but active participants in shaping its climate. As you visualize these ancient Archaeopteryx forests, picture the quality of light filtering through the canopy, the way it dapples the forest floor in patterns that shift with the breeze. Picture the texture of the bark, perhaps rough or scaled, so different from modern trees but still solid and woody beneath your hand. Picture the silence, or perhaps the soft sounds of wind and rain, for this is a world still waiting for the evolution of insects and vertebrates that will fill the forest with sound. We move now into a new chapter of Earth's history, entering a period that scientists call the Carboniferous, beginning 359 million years ago. The Carboniferous, particularly its later half called the Pennsylvanian, is a time of extraordinary forests, vast and strange and utterly unlike anything that exists today. These are the forests that will leave behind the coal deposits that give the period its name, the compressed and transformed remains of countless plants accumulated over millions of years. The Carboniferous world is warm and wet across much of the globe. Sea levels fluctuate, sometimes covering the low-lying continental regions with shallow seas, sometimes retreating and exposing vast coastal plains. In these coastal lowlands, in the river deltas and floodplains, immense swamp forests develop, stretching for thousands of kilometers. These are places of standing water and saturated soil, where dead plant matter accumulates faster than it can decay, slowly building up into thick layers of peat that will eventually become coal. The trees of the Carboniferous swamps are diverse and strange. Dominating the landscape are the lycophytes, members of a plant group that today includes only small club mosses, but which in the Carboniferous evolved into towering giants. The most famous of these are Lepidodendron and Sigillaria, trees that could reach heights of 30 to 40 meters, their trunks rising straight and columnar from the swamp water. Lepidodendron has a trunk covered in a distinctive diamond-shaped pattern, the scars left behind by leaves that have fallen away. These leaf scars give the tree its common name, scale tree, for the pattern resembles reptilian scales or the surface of a pineapple. The trunk of Lepidodendron is surprisingly thin for its height, sometimes only a meter in diameter even at the base, yet it supports the tree's considerable height. The secret lies in the tree's anatomy. Its trunk is composed of a thin cylinder of wood surrounding a large central pith of soft tissue. The tree relies on water pressure within this pith to maintain its rigidity, much like a water-filled tube. At the top of Lepidodendron, the trunk branches in a distinctive pattern, each branch dividing into two, and then dividing again, creating a crown that has been compared to a candelabra. These branches bear long, grass-like leaves that photosynthesize. At certain times, the tips of these branches produce large cone-like structures containing spores. These cones can be enormous, sometimes reaching 30 centimeters in length, packed with microscopic spores that will be released to drift through the swamp on the sands, air and water. Sigillaria is similar to Lepidodendron but typically does not branch, instead rising as a single trunk crowned with a cluster of long leaves. The leaf scars on Sigillaria form a different pattern, more hexagonal, creating a distinctive texture. Some species of Sigillaria produce their spore-bearing cones along the trunk itself, rather than at the tips of branches. Picture now a Carboniferous swamp forest in full development. The Lepidodendron and Sigillaria stand like giant pillars rising from the dark, still water. Their reflections shimmer on the surface, creating a strange doubling effect. The canopy high above is relatively open, for these trees do not branch extensively, allowing considerable light to penetrate to the lower levels. The air is thick and humid, warm even at night, for we are in a tropical or subtropical zone. Beneath the canopy of lycophyte trees, other plants thrive in the wet conditions. There are tree ferns, genuine ferns that have evolved woody trunks and can reach heights of 10 to 15 meters. Their delicate fronds create a secondary canopy layer, their green, lace-like foliage contrasting with the straight trunks of the lycophytes. The tree ferns have names like Psironius, and their trunks are unusual structures, composed not of solid wood but of a dense mass of adventitious roots surrounding a relatively small core. There are also the seed ferns, or pteridosperms, plants that look superficially like ferns but actually reproduce through seeds rather than spores. These plants represent an important evolutionary transition, the development of the seed being one of the most significant innovations in plant history. Seeds package the embryo with a supply of nutrients and a protective coat, allowing plants to colonize drier environments and to wait out unfavorable conditions. In the Carboniferous swamps, seed ferns grow as both small understory plants and as medium-sized trees. Another group present in these ancient forests are the cordaites, distant relatives of modern conifers. Cordaites trees can grow quite tall, with slender trunks and strap-like leaves that may reach a meter in length. They produce seeds in cone-like structures, representing another lineage experimenting with this new reproductive strategy. The cordaites prefer slightly drier areas within the swamp forest, perhaps growing on raised hummocks or along the margins of the wetlands. The Carboniferous swamp forest is not just trees but a complex ecosystem filling every available niche. The ground layer, where it is not covered by water, is carpeted with small ferns, lycopods, and primitive mosses. Fallen logs lie slowly decaying in the water, their surfaces colonized by fungi and algae. The water itself is dark, stained brown by tannins from the decaying plant matter, and in it swim primitive fish and early amphibians, creatures with 4 legs but still tied to the water for reproduction. As we immerse ourselves more deeply in these carboniferous forests, let us consider the life that moves among the trunks and fronds, for the forests are not empty of animal life. Though the creatures that inhabit them are strange by our standards, representatives of evolutionary lineages still experimenting, still finding their way. The Carboniferous period is often called the Age of Amphibians, and indeed, these creatures are diverse and successful in this time. The swamp forests provide ideal habitat for amphibians. With their combination of water and land, their warm, humid conditions. Some amphibians of the Carboniferous are small, salamander-like creatures that hunt insects among the leaf litter. Others are enormous, reaching lengths of 2 meters or more, with heavy bodies and powerful jaws. These large amphibians are predators, lurking in the swamp water, waiting to ambush prey. But perhaps more significant for our story are the invertebrates, the arthropods that have colonized the land and are diversifying rapidly. The Carboniferous forests buzz and crawl with these creatures, far more than any previous period. There are primitive insects, some of them still quite small, but others grown to sizes that seem impossible by modern standards. This gigantism is possible, scientists believe, because the oxygen content of the Carboniferous atmosphere is higher than today's, sometimes reaching 35%, compared to the 21% we breathe now. With more oxygen available, insects can grow larger, their simple respiratory systems able to supply enough oxygen to bigger bodies. In the canopy of the swamp forest, giant dragonflies patrol, their wingspans reaching 70 centimeters. These are not true dragonflies but close relatives called meganeura, and they are aerial predators, hunting other flying insects with their superb vision and agile flight. Imagine one perched on a lepidodendron branch, its huge compound eyes scanning for prey, its gossamer wings refracting the filtered light into rainbow patterns. On the tree trunks and in the leaf litter below, giant millipedes crawl, some species reaching lengths of over 2 meters. These armored arthropods feed on decaying plant matter, their many legs rippling in waves as they move through the debris. They are not dangerous, these ancient millipedes, but they are certainly impressive, their segmented bodies protected by hard exoskeletons that will sometimes fossilize beautifully, preserving details that tell us about their anatomy and way of life. There are also giant scorpions, some species terrestrial and others still semi-aquatic. Hunting in the shallow waters of the swamp, there are early spiders, weaving the first silk webs among the vegetation. There are cockroaches, remarkably similar to modern forms, scuttling through the leaf litter and proving their design's long-term success. The forest floor is alive with movement, with the rustle and click of countless arthropods going about their lives. The sound of a carboniferous forest would be strange to our ears. There are no bird calls, for birds will not evolve for more than 100 million years. There are no mammal sounds, for mammals too are far in the future. But there is sound nonetheless. The hum and buzz of insect wings fills the air. The splash of amphibians entering the water echoes through the trees. Perhaps some insects make sounds we cannot imagine, courtship calls or territorial signals. The drip of water from the canopy is constant in this humid environment, creating a gentle percussion. At night, the forest transforms, without moonlight filtering through the canopy, for the moon in this era appears much larger in the sky. Orbiting closer to Earth, the darkness is profound. Bioluminescence may exist among some organisms, creating faint glows in the darkness, though we cannot be certain. The nocturnal hunters emerge, amphibians with wide mouths and patient habits, arthropods with senses tuned to vibration and chemical signals. The day shift retires to rest, and the night shift begins its work. As you picture this ancient ecosystem, consider the interconnections, the ways in which each organism depends on others. The trees produce the oxygen that allows the arthropods to grow large. The arthropods, in death, return nutrients to the soil that feed the trees. The amphibians control the populations of invertebrates, preventing any one species from overwhelming the system. The fungi that we cannot see but which are certainly present break down the dead wood and leaves, releasing nutrients and completing cycles. It is a functioning ecosystem, different from any today, but following the same fundamental principles of energy flow and nutrient cycling. The carboniferous swamps are also sites of tremendous carbon burial. The plant matter that falls into the water does not fully decay, for the waterlogged, oxygen-poor conditions slow decomposition. Instead, it accumulates, layer upon layer, building up deposits that will eventually be compressed by geological forces into seams of coal. This burial of carbon removes it from the atmospheric cycle, gradually drawing down carbon dioxide levels. Over millions of years, this process will contribute to the cooling of the planet, eventually leading to glaciation and climate changes that will transform these lush swamps. As we continue our journey through the ancient forests, we encounter one of the most important innovations in plant evolution, one that will eventually allow trees to colonize every continent and adapt to nearly every terrestrial environment. This is the evolution of the seed, a deceptively simple structure that represents a profound shift in reproductive strategy. To understand the importance of the seed, let us first consider the challenges faced by plants that reproduce through spores, as all early land plants did, and as the giant lycophytes of the carboniferous swamps still do. A spore is a single cell, microscopic and vulnerable. It contains the genetic material needed to produce a new plant, but no food supply, no protection beyond a thin cell wall. When a spore is released, it must land in a suitable place quickly, for it cannot survive long without moisture. Even when it germinates, the resulting structure is tiny and vulnerable, dependent on finding water and nutrients immediately. The seed changes everything. A seed is a package, a sophisticated structure that contains not just the embryo of a new plant, but also a supply of nutrients to sustain that embryo until it can begin photosynthesizing on its own. The seed is protected by one or more layers of tissue forming a seed coat, which shields the embryo from desiccation, mechanical damage, and sometimes from being eaten. Seeds can be large enough to see easily, some even large enough to hold in your hand. They can survive for months or even years in dormant states, waiting for conditions to become favorable before germinating. The evolution of the seed begins in the late Devonian with the seed ferns, or pteridosperms, which we have already encountered growing in the understory of Archaeopteris forests and later in the Carboniferous swamps. These plants produce seeds that are relatively simple, essentially consisting of a megasporangium A, structure that would produce spores in earlier plants, that is retained on the parent plant and supplied with nutrients. Over time, these structures become more sophisticated, developing protective layers and mechanisms for dispersal. By the Carboniferous period, several different lineages have independently evolved seed-like structures, suggesting that seeds provide such a significant advantage that evolution has found this solution multiple times. The cordytes produce seeds in cone-like structures, resembling in some ways the cones of modern conifers. Other seed plants produce seeds with wing-like structures that catch the wind, allowing them to drift far from the parent plant. Still, others produce seeds that are adapted for water dispersal or for being eaten by animals and deposited elsewhere in their droppings, though animal dispersal is less common in this era than it will be later. As the Carboniferous period gives way to the Permian period, about 299 million years ago, the seed plants begin to diversify and dominate. The climate is changing, becoming drier in many regions. The vast swamp forests of the Carboniferous are retreating, persisting only in the most humid lowlands. In their place, on slightly higher ground and in more seasonal climates, new forests emerge, forests dominated by seed plants. These Permian forests include the ancestors of modern conifers, early representatives of groups that will eventually give rise to pines, firs, spruces, and their relatives. These early conifers still look somewhat different from their modern descendants, but they share fundamental features: woody trunks, needle-like or scale-like leaves, and seeds borne in phallous cones. The conifers are well adapted to the drying climate, their needles reducing water loss, their seeds able to wait out unfavorable conditions. Picture a Permian forest of early conifers. The trees are not as tall as the giant lycophytes of the Carboniferous swamps, perhaps reaching heights of 15 to 20 meters, but they are sturdy and well adapted. Their trunks are covered in thick bark, protection against fire and herbivory. Their branches spread in irregular patterns, bearing clusters of short, needle-like leaves. The canopy is more open than in the dense Carboniferous swamps, allowing more light to reach the ground. The forest floor in this Permian conifer woodland is drier, the soil better drained. Instead of standing water, there is a layer of shed needles and small branches, slowly decomposing. Ferns still grow in the moister spots, but they are less dominant now. There are seed ferns, still diverse and successful. There are also new plants, early cycads and ginkgos, representatives of groups that will persist to the modern day, living fossils that carry in their genes the memory of these ancient times. The fauna of the Permian forests is changing too. The giant amphibians of the Carboniferous are in decline, being replaced by early reptiles, that are better adapted to the drier conditions. These reptiles do not need to return to water to reproduce. They lay amniotic eggs with leathery shells, another kind of package that protects the developing embryo. Some of these reptiles are herbivores, the first vertebrate animals to eat plants extensively, and they browse on the ferns and seed ferns of the forest floor. Others are predators, hunting the herbivores and smaller animals. The Permian period ends with the most catastrophic extinction event in Earth's history, occurring about 252 million years ago. The cause of this extinction is still debated by scientists, but massive volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia are likely involved, releasing enormous amounts of carbon dioxide and other gases into the atmosphere, causing rapid climate change. The extinction eliminates the majority of species on Earth, both in the oceans and on land. The great lycophyte trees of the Carboniferous, already in decline, are wiped out entirely. Many other plant lineages disappear or are greatly reduced, but some plants survive. The seed plants, with their adaptable reproductive strategy, weather the extinction better than the spore-bearing plants. In the aftermath of the Permian extinction, the world is ready for the next chapter in the story of forests, a chapter that will be dominated by the descendants of those surviving seed plants. Following the devastation of the end Permian extinction, the Earth enters a new era that geologists call the Mesozoic, which spans from 252 million years ago to 66 million years ago. The Mesozoic is often called the Age of Dinosaurs, and indeed, these remarkable reptiles will come to dominate terrestrial ecosystems for much of this time. But it might also be called the Age of Conifers, for it is in this era that coniferous forests spread across the globe, becoming the dominant forest type in most regions. The Triassic period, the first part of the Mesozoic, is a time of recovery and innovation following the extinction. The climate is generally warm and dry, with vast continental deserts in the interior regions. Near the coasts and in mountainous areas where moisture is more available, forests begin to re-establish themselves. These forests are dominated by conifers, which have proven themselves well adapted to a wide range of conditions. The conifers of the Triassic are diverse, representing many lineages, some of which will survive to the present day, and others which will eventually go extinct. There are relatives of modern pines, with their long needles borne in bundles. There are relatives of the Araucaria, trees that today grow in the southern hemisphere, and are known for their distinctive, symmetrical form and stiff, overlapping leaves. There are early members of the Cupressaceae family, which today includes cedars, cypresses, and redwoods. Imagine walking through a Triassic conifer forest. The air is warm, the quality of light bright and clear. The trees stand at intervals, their trunks straight and their bark thick and deeply furrowed. Fallen needles crunch softly underfoot, releasing a resinous scent when crushed. The forest is relatively open, the canopy not so dense as to block all light. This openness allows an understory of ferns, cycads, and bennettitals, a group of seed plants that superficially resemble cycads, but are actually more closely related to flowering plants. The cycads of the Triassic are more diverse than the few species that survive today. They grow as small trees or large shrubs, with thick trunks topped by crowns of stiff, fern-like fronds. They produce large cones, male and female cones on separate plants, and their seeds are often brightly colored, perhaps to attract animals for dispersal. The bennettitales are similar in appearance but have different reproductive structures, sometimes bearing flower-like organs that are not true flowers but convergent structures that serve similar functions. As the Mesozoic continues into the Jurassic period, beginning about 201 million years ago, the climate becomes more humid in many regions. Sea levels rise, fragmenting the supercontinent Pangaea and creating more coastal areas. The increased moisture supports the spread of forests, and the Jurassic becomes a time of lush, verdant landscapes. The conifer forests of the Jurassic are magnificent. In some regions, particularly what is now the western coast of North America, forests of giant conifers develop, some trees reaching heights of 50 meters or more. These are the ancestors of the modern redwoods and sequoias, trees that even today can grow to extraordinary sizes. Their trunks are massive, sometimes 10 meters in diameter, their wood dense and resistant to decay. Their crowns spread high above, catching the light and fog that rolls in from the ocean. Beneath these giant conifers, the forest is dim and cool. The thick canopy blocks much of the sunlight, creating a deeply shaded environment. Ferns thrive in this shade, their fronds creating a lush ground cover. Tree ferns, some species reaching heights of 15 meters, form a subcanopy layer. The air is humid, moisture dripping from the foliage, condensation from the fog that frequently bathes these forests. In other regions, different conifer forests develop. In the higher latitudes, forests of mixed conifers and ginkgos spread across the land. The ginkgo, a tree that today has only a single surviving species, is diverse and successful in the Jurassic, with many species growing in various environments. Ginkgos are distinctive trees, with their fan-shaped leaves that turn golden yellow before falling in autumn, making them among the first deciduous gymnosperms. The forests of the Jurassic are inhabited by dinosaurs, some of which grow to enormous sizes. Long-necked sauropods browse on the high foliage of the conifers, reaching leaves that no other herbivore can access. Their impact on the forest structure is significant, creating gaps in the canopy, distributing seeds in their droppings, and opening up areas for new growth. Smaller ornithischian dinosaurs browse the understory, while theropods, the predatory dinosaurs, hunt among the trees. Flying reptiles, the pterosaurs, glide between the trees and over the canopy. Some species adapted for catching insects in midair, others for plucking fruits or seeds. Early mammals, still small and mostly nocturnal, scurry through the leaf litter, feeding on insects and seeds and the occasional small vertebrate. Birds have just begun to evolve, descended from small theropod dinosaurs, and the first primitive forms are appearing, though they are not yet the diverse and successful group they will become. As we move into the Cretaceous period, the final chapter of the Mesozoic era, beginning about 145 million years ago, the forests are about to undergo yet another transformation, perhaps the most dramatic since the first trees evolved. This transformation is the rise of the flowering plants, the angiosperms, a group that will eventually come to dominate terrestrial plant life, and which today includes the vast majority of plant species. The exact origin of flowering plants is still somewhat mysterious to scientists, often referred to as Darwin's abominable mystery, because the first angiosperms appear in the fossil record rather suddenly, already relatively diverse. Without clear intermediate forms, current evidence suggests that angiosperms evolved in the early Cretaceous, possibly in tropical or subtropical wetland environments. The earliest known flowering plant fossils date to around 130 million years ago. These early flowering plants are small, possibly herbaceous or small shrubby forms, growing in disturbed habitats along riverbanks or in forest gaps. But they possess several revolutionary features that will give them enormous advantages. The most obvious is the flower itself, a structure that facilitates pollination. Flowers are attractive to animals, particularly insects, offering nectar and pollen as rewards. In return, these animal visitors carry pollen from one flower to another, providing a much more efficient method of pollination than the wind pollination used by conifers and other gymnosperms. Another crucial innovation is the fruit, a structure that encloses and protects the seeds and aids in their dispersal. Fruits can be attractive to animals, which eat them and later deposit the seeds far from the parent plant. Fruits can have wings or hooks for wind or animal dispersal. They can float on water. The diversity of fruit types allows angiosperms to colonize new habitats efficiently. Through the Cretaceous period, flowering plants diversify rapidly. They evolve into many different forms, from herbs to shrubs to trees. They develop partnerships with insects, birds, and eventually mammals, co-evolving in complex relationships. By the Middle Cretaceous, about 100 million years ago, angiosperm trees have begun to appear in forests, growing alongside the conifers that have dominated for so long. Picture a mid-Cretaceous forest, a transitional landscape where the old order is giving way to the new. The tall conifers still dominate the canopy, their ancient lineages continuing as they have for tens of millions of years. But beneath them, and in gaps where old trees have fallen, angiosperm trees are establishing themselves. These early flowering trees include magnolias and their relatives, trees with large, showy flowers and simple leaves. There are early members of the laurel family, with their aromatic leaves and inconspicuous flowers. These angiosperm trees grow faster than conifers, scientists believe, able to exploit disturbed areas and gaps more quickly. Their wood is often less dense, allowing for rapid growth. Their leaves are typically broad and flat, efficient at capturing light in understory conditions. When they die and their leaves fall, those leaves decompose more rapidly than conifer needles, enriching the soil and accelerating nutrient cycling. As the Cretaceous continues, the angiosperms become more and more diverse and successful. By the late Cretaceous, around 80 million years ago, flowering plants have become dominant in many ecosystems, particularly in the lower latitudes. Forests in what is now North America and Asia are mixed forests, with conifers still present, especially in upland and higher latitude areas, but with angiosperms dominant in lowland and tropical regions. These late Cretaceous forests include early representatives of many modern plant families. There are oaks and beeches, though not quite like modern species. There are maples and sycamores. There are palms, with their distinctive unbranched trunks and crowns of large leaves. There are tropical hardwoods, trees with dense, durable wood, and various strategies for surviving in competitive, species-rich forests. The fauna of these forests has evolved alongside the plants. Insects have diversified tremendously, with butterflies and moths, bees and wasps, all groups that depend on flowers for nectar and pollen. Birds have become more diverse, including many species that feed on fruits and seeds and help disperse them. Mammals are still relatively small but are beginning to diversify, with some lineages adapting to life in the trees. The first steps toward the primates that will eventually include ourselves. The Cretaceous period ends, like the Permian before it, with a mass extinction event. About 66 million years ago, a massive asteroid impacts the Earth in what is now the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. The impact releases energy equivalent to billions of nuclear bombs, triggering wildfires, tsunamis, and a nuclear winter effect as dust and debris block the sun. The extinction eliminates the non-avian dinosaurs and many other groups, including many plant species. But once again, the seed plants prove resilient. Many flowering plant species survive, particularly those with seeds that can remain dormant in the soil. In the aftermath of the extinction, as the dust settles and sunlight returns, these surviving species germinate and begin to repopulate the devastated landscapes. The Cenozoic era, the age we still live in today, begins with forests recovering and evolving into the diverse ecosystems we see around us. We enter now the Cenozoic era, beginning 66 million years ago and extending to the present day. This is the age of mammals, the age in which the descendants of those small Mesozoic creatures diversify and come to occupy nearly every terrestrial niche. It is also the age in which flowering plants reach their greatest diversity, creating forests of extraordinary complexity and beauty across the globe. The early Cenozoic, the Paleocene and Eocene epochs, is a time of warm global climates. Even the polar regions are temperate, with forests growing in what is now Antarctica and northern Alaska. These forests are dominated by flowering plants, with conifers persisting but largely restricted to certain niches. The diversity of tree species is high, particularly in the tropics and subtropics, where rainforests develop that rival, in complexity, anything existing today. In these early Cenozoic forests, many modern plant families are present and recognizable, though the specific species are often different from those alive today. There are forests of oaks and beeches in the temperate regions, their canopies creating the dappled light we associate with deciduous forests. There are forests dominated by magnolias and other early angiosperm lineages. In the tropics, there are rainforests of astonishing diversity, with hundreds of tree species coexisting in a single hectare. The tropical rainforests of the Eocene are perhaps the most complex ecosystems Earth has ever produced. The canopy is layered, with emergent trees rising 50 meters or more, their crowns spreading wide in the bright sunlight above. Below them, a main canopy layer of trees, 30 to 40 meters tall, creates a continuous cover. Beneath that, a sub-canopy and understory of smaller trees and shrubs fill the space, and on the forest floor, herbs and ferns grow in the dim light that filters through all the layers above. These rainforests are interconnected ecosystems of breathtaking complexity. Trees depend on animals for pollination and seed dispersal, with different tree species specialized for different animals. Insects pollinate many species, but birds and bats are also important pollinators, particularly for trees with large flowers. Fruits are eaten by birds, bats, monkeys, and other mammals, and the seeds pass through their digestive systems to be deposited far from the parent tree. Epiphytes, plants that grow on other plants, are abundant in these rainforests. Orchids and bromeliads cling to branches, their roots drawing moisture from the air and their leaves funneling rain to their roots. Ferns and mosses cover tree trunks and branches, creating miniature gardens in the canopy. Lianas, woody vines, climb from the forest floor to the canopy, using the trees as scaffolding to reach the light. The fauna of these forests is diverse beyond imagining. In the Eocene, early primates swing through the trees, the ancestors of monkeys, apes, and eventually humans. Primitive horses and their relatives browse in the more open forests. Huge, flightless birds stalk the undergrowth, predators in ecosystems still adjusting to the absence of large dinosaurs. In the trees, early bats and flying lemurs glide from branch to branch. As the Cenozoic continues, the climate gradually cools. By the Oligocene epoch, around 34 million years ago, ice begins to accumulate on Antarctica. The global temperature gradient increases, with cooler conditions at high latitudes and warmer conditions near the equator. This temperature gradient drives changes in vegetation patterns, with tropical forests contracting toward the equator and temperate and eventually boreal forests developing at higher latitudes. The grasslands begin to expand in this cooler, drier climate, particularly in continental interiors and in rain shadows. This expansion of grasslands represents a new opportunity for plants and a new challenge for forests. Grasses are adapted to grazing and fire, two factors that can prevent tree establishment. Where grasslands establish, forests retreat to wetter areas, to fire-protected valleys, to areas where herbivores are less concentrated. In the Miocene epoch, from about 23 to 5 million years ago, many modern forest types become established in their current distributions. The boreal forests, dominated by conifers such as spruces, firs, and larches, spread across northern latitudes, adapted to short growing seasons and long, cold winters. Temperate deciduous forests of oaks, maples, and beeches develop in mid-latitudes, their trees shedding leaves in autumn to survive the winter. Mediterranean forests of evergreen oaks and pines develop in regions with wet winters and dry summers. The tropical rainforests, though reduced from their maximum extent in the Eocene, remain the most diverse terrestrial ecosystems. The Amazon rainforest, the Congo rainforest, the rainforests of Southeast Asia, each hosts tens of thousands of plant species, many of them trees, each with its own unique requirements and relationships. These forests are ancient in their lineages, with many plant families having evolved in the tropics and persisted there for tens of millions of years. By the Pliocene and Pleistocene epochs, from about 5 million to 10,000 years ago, the Earth enters a period of repeated glaciations, ice ages, during which massive ice sheets advance from the poles, covering large areas of the northern continents. These glaciations have profound effects on forests, pushing them southward during cold periods and allowing them to expand northward during warmer interglacials. Let us pause now in our journey through time and consider what remains, what evidence these ancient forests have left behind, and how scientists have pieced together this long and complex story. The forests we have explored existed millions of years before there were any humans to witness them, yet we can describe them with remarkable detail, thanks to the preserved remnants they have left in stone and sediment. Fossils are the primary source of our knowledge about ancient forests. When a tree dies and falls, it usually decays, its organic matter consumed by bacteria, fungi, and invertebrates, its nutrients recycled back into the ecosystem. But occasionally, under special circumstances, the remains of plants are preserved, their forms captured in rock, sometimes in exquisite detail. The most spectacular preservation occurs when plant material is rapidly buried, often by volcanic ash, river sediment, or in the case of the Carboniferous swamps, by accumulating peat. Rapid burial protects the remains from decay and from being scattered. Over time, minerals dissolved in groundwater permeate the buried plant material, gradually replacing the organic matter with stone while preserving the structure. This is the process of permineralization, and it can preserve details down to the cellular level. Imagine scientists carefully excavating a fossil forest, perhaps in a remote desert where ancient rocks have been exposed by erosion. They work slowly, brushing away sand and stone to reveal the petrified remains of trees that stood 300 million years ago. The straw trunks are now stone, but they retain the shape and texture of the original wood. Cross-sections show growth rings, patterns that tell of good years and lean years, of droughts and abundant rains. The cellular structure is sometimes preserved so perfectly that thin sections viewed under a microscope reveal the individual cells, the patterns of xylem and phloem, the structures that transported water and nutrients. Other fossils preserve only the impression of plants. Compressions, where the plant material has been flattened between layers of sediment. These compression fossils can preserve incredible detail of leaves, fronds, and bark patterns. The famous fossil forests of the Carboniferous are known primarily from such compression fossils, with exquisite fern fronds and lycophyte leaves pressed into coal shales like botanical pressings in a stone book. Sometimes, fossil forests are found still in their original positions of growth, their stumps rooted in ancient soil horizons. These In situ forests provide unique insights into the structure of the ancient ecosystems, showing how trees were spaced, how tall they grew, what other plants grew alongside them. The Gilboa Fossil Forest in New York State, preserving an ancient Devonian forest, includes tree stumps and root systems still in place, allowing scientists to reconstruct the forest's structure and composition. Fossil pollen and spores provide another line of evidence. These microscopic structures are produced in vast quantities by plants and are remarkably resistant to decay. They settle into lake sediments and peat bogs, building up layer by layer over thousands or millions of years. Scientists can extract cores from these sediments and identify the pollen at different depths, creating a timeline of vegetation change. This technique, called palynology, has revealed much about how forests responded to past climate changes, how they migrated across continents, how their composition changed over time. The fossil record is not complete, of course. Preservation is rare, requiring special conditions that don't always occur. Many ancient forests have left no trace, their remains completely decomposed or destroyed by geological processes. What we have is a sampling, snapshots from particular places and times. But this sampling is extensive enough that scientists can reconstruct broad patterns, can trace lineages through time, can understand the major evolutionary innovations and ecological changes. Molecular evidence complements the fossil record. By comparing the DNA sequences of living plants, scientists can reconstruct evolutionary relationships and estimate when different lineages diverged from each other. These molecular clocks, calibrated against fossil dates, extend our understanding beyond what fossils alone can tell us. They reveal relationships that might not be obvious from morphology and provide dates for events that left no clear fossil record. Together, fossils and molecular data tell a coherent story, one of innovation and adaptation, of extinctions and recoveries, of the slow but inexorable transformation of the land from barren rock to the green world we inhabit. Every tree living today carries in its genes the legacy of this long history, the accumulated wisdom of hundreds of millions of years of evolution. The oak in your local park is the descendant of trees that grew in Cretaceous forests. Those trees descended from Carboniferous seed ferns, those from Devonian progymnosperms, back and back to the first tiny plants that ventured onto land. When you walk through a forest, any forest, you are walking through deep time. The soil beneath your feet was built over millions of years. Grains of rock weathered by roots and mixed with organic matter from countless generations of plants. The air you breathe has been enriched with oxygen by plants for hundreds of millions of years. The sunlight filtering through the canopy is the same sunlight that fell on Archaeopteris forests and Lepidodendron swamps. You are part of this continuum, a momentary consciousness observing a process that extends far beyond any human timescale. Throughout the long history we have traced, one constant theme emerges: the intimate relationship between forests and climate, each shaping the other in a complex feedback loop that has influenced the entire planet. Let us explore this relationship, understanding how forests have both responded to climate change and driven it, how they have acted as thermostats and carbon banks, how they have transformed the very atmosphere we breathe. The first forests, those Devonian stands of Watesa and Archaeopteris, began a process that continues to this day. The drawdown of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Trees, in order to build their bodies, take carbon dioxide from the air through photosynthesis, combining it with water to create sugars and other organic compounds. Much of this carbon is locked away in wood, in trunks, and branches that can persist for centuries. When trees die in environments where decay is slow, such as waterlogged swamps or cool peat bogs, this carbon can be buried and removed from the active carbon cycle for millions of years. The spread of forests in the Devonian is thought to have caused significant climate cooling. The deep roots of these first trees accelerated the chemical weathering of rocks, breaking down silicate minerals and consuming carbon dioxide in the process. The organic matter they added to soil enhanced weathering further. Scientists estimate that atmospheric carbon dioxide levels may have dropped significantly during this period, perhaps contributing to the ice ages that occurred in the late Devonian. The most dramatic example of forests altering climate came in the Carboniferous period. The vast swamp forests we explored earlier, with their giant lycophytes and tree ferns, accumulated plant matter at an extraordinary rate. The wood and bark of these trees contained lignin, a complex organic polymer that was difficult for the existing decomposer organisms to break down. As a result, dead plant material accumulated in the swamps, forming thick layers of peat. Over millions of years, enormous amounts of carbon were buried in these swamps. Atmospheric carbon dioxide levels dropped substantially, from perhaps 1,500 parts per million in the early Carboniferous to as low as 300 parts per million by the end of the period. This drawdown of greenhouse gases contributed to the cooling of the climate, eventually leading to widespread glaciation in the southern hemisphere. The forests, in effect, refrigerated the planet. But the relationship between forests and climate is not one way. Forests also respond to climate changes caused by other factors. The extinction at the end of the Permian, triggered by massive volcanic eruptions, released enormous amounts of carbon dioxide and caused rapid warming. The forests of that time were devastated, not just by the heat, but by the disrupted rainfall patterns, the acidification of soils, the breakdown of symbiotic relationships. The recovery of forests after this extinction took millions of years. In the Cenozoic, as the climate cooled gradually from the warm Eocene to the glacial Pleistocene, forests migrated and transformed. Tropical forests, which had extended to high latitudes during the Eocene, contracted toward the equator. Temperate forests developed in the mid-latitudes. Their deciduous trees adapted to seasonal cold. Boreal forests spread across the northern continents, dominated by evergreen conifers that could survive long winters and short growing seasons. During the Pleistocene ice ages, forests in the northern hemisphere underwent repeated cycles of retreat and advance. During glacial periods, ice sheets extended far south, covering areas that today are temperate forest. The trees retreated ahead of the ice, finding refuge in areas that remained habitable. In North America, they moved south. In Europe, many were trapped against the Mediterranean and went extinct, unable to cross the mountain barriers. During interglacial periods, as the ice retreated, forests followed it northward, recolonizing the previously glaciated lands. These migrations left signatures in the genetic structure of modern trees. Populations that survived in different refugia developed genetic differences, and when they recolonized the landscape, they mixed in complex patterns. Scientists studying the DNA of modern trees can identify these refugia and trace the roots of post-glacial migration, reading the Ice Age history in the tree's genes. Forests also influence climate through their effects on water cycles. Trees draw water from the soil through their roots and release it to the atmosphere through their leaves in a process called transpiration. This water vapor can form clouds and eventually fall as rain, potentially far from the forest itself. Large forests, particularly tropical rainforests, essentially create their own rainfall, pumping moisture into the atmosphere that contributes to regional and even global precipitation patterns. The loss of forest can, therefore, lead to drying, creating a positive feedback loop where deforestation leads to less rain, which leads to more tree death, which leads to even less rain. The Amazon rainforest, for example, plays a crucial role in South American climate. The moisture it transpires contributes to rainfall as far south as the agricultural regions of southern Brazil and Argentina. Scientists have coined the term flying rivers to describe the streams of water vapor that flow from the Amazon across the continent. The health of the Amazon forest is, therefore, not just a local concern but one with continental implications. Forests also affect local and regional temperatures through their influence on albedo, the reflectiveness of the Earth's surface. Forests, particularly evergreen forests, are darker than many other land surfaces and absorb more solar radiation. This absorption warms the local area, an effect that is particularly significant in boreal regions where forests are much darker than snow-covered ground. The balance between forests' cooling effect through carbon uptake and their warming effect through low albedo is complex and varies by latitude and forest type. As you rest and allow these thoughts to drift through your mind, consider the forests of today, the descendants of all those ancient forests we have explored. They continue to play their role in Earth's climate system, drawing down carbon, influencing water cycles, moderating temperatures. They are part of a planetary life support system that has been evolving for hundreds of millions of years. The decisions we make about forests today are decisions about the future climate, about the kind of world we will pass on to future generations. We come now to the end of our journey through the ancient forests, arriving at the present moment and looking forward to the future. The story of forests is not finished. It continues, each day, in every forest on Earth, as trees grow and reproduce, as ecosystems evolve, as the great cycles of carbon and water and nutrients continue their eternal turning. Stand for a moment at the edge of a forest, any forest. It might be a temperate deciduous forest in autumn, the leaves turning gold and red before they fall. It might be a tropical rainforest, green and alive with the sounds of countless creatures. It might be a boreal forest of spruce and fir, dark and quiet under a northern sky. Whatever forest you imagine, know that it is connected to all the forests that came before, part of an unbroken lineage stretching back hundreds of millions of years. The trees you see are the latest expressions of evolutionary processes that began in the Devonian, when the first woody stems reached toward the sky. The leaves, whether broad or narrow, simple or compound, are variations on themes first explored by ancient plants. The seeds that fall from the trees, whether enclosed in fleshy fruits or protected in woody cones, use strategies refined over countless generations. The roots that spread through the soil follow patterns established by the earliest vascular plants. But each modern forest is also unique, shaped by its particular history, its local climate, its community of species. No two forests are exactly alike, just as no two trees are exactly alike. Each has its own character, its own rhythms, its own story. A temperate forest in spring is a place of awakening, of leaves unfurling and flowers blooming, of birds returning to nest. The same forest in winter is a place of rest, of bare branches and sleeping buds, of energy conserved against the cold. A tropical rainforest knows no winter, but it has its own seasons, wet and dry, when different trees flower and fruit in carefully timed succession. The forest hums with constant activity, with insects and birds and mammals pursuing their lives in the green, multi-layered space. Fungi thread through the soil, connecting trees in underground networks, sharing nutrients and information in ways scientists are only beginning to understand. A boreal forest in the far north experiences dramatic seasonal extremes, from the midnight sun of summer to the long darkness of winter. The trees there grow slowly, adding only a narrow ring each year, their wood dense and durable. They have adapted to fire, their cones opening only when heated, their seeds germinating in the ash-enriched soil. the forest renews itself through fire, a cycle as ancient as the trees themselves. Human beings entered this story relatively recently, only a few 100,000 years ago. For most of our existence, we lived in and around forests, gathering their fruits, hunting their animals, using their wood for fire and shelter. We developed a deep knowledge of forests, learning which plants were edible or medicinal, which woods made the best tools, where animals could be found. Forests shaped our evolution, providing the complex three-dimensional environment that may have favored the development of our intelligence and manual dexterity. But our relationship with forests changed dramatically with the development of agriculture, beginning about 10,000 years ago. As we cleared land for crops and livestock, forests retreated. The process accelerated with the growth of civilization, the development of metallurgy and industry, the expansion of human populations. Many of the great forests that once covered the earth have been reduced, fragmented, or eliminated entirely. The forests that remain face new challenges: climate change, pollution, invasive species, diseases. Yet, forests persist, and they continue to provide essential services to the biosphere and to humanity. They purify water and air, prevent erosion, maintain biodiversity, store carbon, and provide resources and recreation. Scientists recognize the crucial importance of preserving existing forests and restoring those that have been lost. Around the world, efforts are underway to protect old-growth forests, to reforest degraded lands, to manage forests sustainably so they can continue to thrive while also meeting human needs. The future of forests depends on the choices we make in the coming decades. Will we recognize the value of these ancient ecosystems and act to preserve them? Will we address the climate change that threatens to disrupt the carefully balanced relationships that have evolved over millions of years? Will we make space for forests to exist alongside human communities, recognizing that our well-being and theirs are ultimately inseparable? These are questions for the waking world, questions that require thought and action and courage. But for now, as you rest on the edge of sleep, let yourself be comforted by the knowledge that forests have endured for hundreds of millions of years, that they have weathered extinctions and climate changes, and all the accidents of geological history. They are resilient, adaptive, persistent. The forest is eternal, not in the sense that any individual forest lasts forever, but in the sense that the idea of forest, the pattern of forest, renews itself again and again, generation after generation. Let the image of the forest be your companion as you drift toward sleep. Picture the ancient Archaeopteryx forests of the Devonian, the giant lycophyte swamps of the Carboniferous, the conifer forests of the Mesozoic, the flowering forests of the Cenozoic, each one giving way to the next, but each one leaving its legacy. Picture the forests of today, breathing and growing, their roots deep in the earth, their branches reaching for the sky. You are part of this story, too. The oxygen you breathe was produced by forests, by the endless work of photosynthesis. The food you eat comes from plants or from animals that eat plants. The water you drink has been filtered through forest soils. The climate that makes your life possible is regulated by forests. You are embedded in the great cycles of life that forests maintain, as much a part of the forest as the trees themselves. Rest now, knowing that while you sleep, the forests continue their slow, patient work. Trees are growing, adding wood to their trunks, reaching upward millimeter by millimeter. Leaves are photosynthesizing, turning sunlight into life. Seeds are germinating, sending roots down and shoots up, beginning the long journey toward becoming trees themselves. The great cycles turn, the forest breathes, and all is as it should be. Let yourself sleep now, carried on the deep currents of time, resting in the shade of ancient forests, part of a story that began 400 million years ago and continues into a future we can only imagine. The forest embraces you, shelters you, welcomes you home. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and rest. The forest eternal keeps watch through the night, as it always has, as it always will. Sleep well.